the one biggest takeaway that being a dealer principal has done for me is it's helped me learn patience on a new level. And I still work on that every single day. I came from an industry where I literally, with my staff and my customers, I was allowed to strike them.
Give me my theme music.
Oh, he remembered what button to mash.
He's got it. All right. He's got it.
Old habits die hard.
Welcome back to Moving Metal, the show. Big shout out to my co-host, Dingle Ingle, B Porcupine,
Dingle-angle.
and our guest for the day, Mr. Monty Hendrix. Thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. All right, Monty. So let's start by an introduction, man. Tell us who you are, what you do, where you come from, all those good things.
So I'm Monty Hendrix. I own World Class Powersports High Point in High Point, North Carolina. We're a Polaris off-road, Polaris slingshot, and Indian motorcycle dealer. Been in powersports industry for around 13 years. Grew up right outside of Hickory, North Carolina, in Maiden, North Carolina. I'm originally from Rutherford County, and but grew up Catawba County. Went to school in Chapel Hill, studied broadcast journalism, and I have a second degree in interpersonal communications, which is kind of like what we're doing here. And while I was in Chapel Hill, I was in college, but I was studying something I was very passionate about, which was I was on a competitive martial arts circuit. And so I was traveling the country while I was in school and competing. And when the day finally came that I finally graduated, I actually moved to Greensboro and opened a martial arts studio in Greensboro, and ended up over time, I had 4 studios and around 450 students.
Wow.
Yeah. And
So don't mess with Monty.
no. It's good exercise. It's good exercise.
Don't go Judy and nobody. Don't need to be Judy, right?
Don't Judy chop it. That's right. But I was actually in the studio working late one night, and at the time I was 39 years old. I'm 38, 39, something like that. And we had a very successful operation, again, 450 students. And I thought to myself, I'm vastly closing in on this 40-year-old mark. And I thought, if I'm ever going to expand into something different, now's probably the time. And so growing up, I had a mentor that was an uncle by marriage who owned 4 RV dealerships. And my dad, who's an entrepreneur, had also owned a used car dealership with a partner. And so I started thinking, if I want to pursue something different at this midpoint of life, I think I would like to do something with wheels and tires. And so I knew I did not want to be involved in the RV industry. First of all, I didn't need 100 acres of property and so forth. So we immediately started looking at cars, and in the Greensboro area, we found that every OEM was occupied except for one, and that was Mitsubishi.
Of course it was.
It was Mitsubishi. Yes. So I called a good friend of mine that had been a student for years, who had moved to Atlanta and was a GM at a Chevrolet dealership. And his name's Buck Murray. I called Buck and I say, Buck, I'm like, can a standalone Mitsubishi dealership survive? And he paused and he got kind of quiet, and he said, well, it'd have to have a hell of a used business. And I thought, okay. So we reached out and we made contact with Mitsubishi, and we got the information. And I realized that to do that project, I was going to need a partner, and I wasn't really interested in that. So we kept looking. Had been a motorcyclist since I was in my early 20s. And I thought, well, maybe bikes. And so we started investigating the bike industry. Again, hit some roadblocks because so many of the OEMs were occupied in the area. And I was interested in an expansion in my career, but I was not interested in moving from Greensboro. Right. So, we found out that Polaris Industries had just recently bought the Indian motorcycle brand. reached out to them and they said, yeah, Greensboro area is a place that we're interested in. And that kind of started the ball rolling. And that's how I got into power sports.
So did I hear this right? Were you one of the first 10 Indian dealerships in the country?
We were, I don't know if we were one of the first 10. And the only reason for that is because they already had maybe a dozen and a half that were holdover from the Kings Mountain era.
Gotcha.
That they kept. Now, some of those fell off pretty soon, but they released the new 2014 bikes in 2013 at Sturgis, and that is about the same exact time that I was getting involved with dealer development, and we opened in early 2014. So we were definitely one of the early adopters. There's no two ways about it. I don't know what the exact number was, but we've been in there since pretty much since the rip. So.
Got to be one of the first 10 once it changed hands.
Yeah.
That's what I would assume.
Yeah, there was
probably. How was that? Where you started with them in 2014 versus where you are with them now? Yeah. How's that changeover been?
Well, it was actually a really good thing for me because I was coming from outside of the industry. So from a personal perspective, they started off and they only had 3 models. And really 2 of them were the same bike.
Oh, wow.
The difference between 2 models is one came with saddlebags and one didn't. So, and they only had
the dresser.
Right. They only had 3 colors. And coming from outside the industry, it was kind of a good thing for me because as I came in, and fortunately the relaunching of the brand caught on. And so I had the opportunity to grow as the brand did. And that was really a good thing. I wasn't overwhelmed to start with. We had a skeleton crew coming out of the gate, and it was great. And again, coming from outside the industry, in hindsight, somebody might tell you, "Oh, the launch was terrible." To me, I thought it was great. I was very satisfied. I thought Polaris did a great job relaunching the brand and releasing new R&D into the brand, and really just letting people know that that it was back.
Right.
The big challenge for me was that on May the 2nd, 2014. My dealership didn't exist. And on May the 3rd, 2014, it did. And the bikes were so new that when we opened up, new back, and people had such interest that when we opened the doors in downtown Greensboro, the showroom was in downtown Greensboro at the time. When we opened the doors on May the 3rd, 2014, it was like the opening of Star Wars, 1977. They were lined.
You don't know anything about Star Wars.
They were lined down the block, dude. And here I am with my 8 bikes they had sent me, and people were coming in, and but they didn't care. It was we had some apparel and so forth, and the first day, and I had set a goal. I told the staff, I said, today, this Saturday, these 8 bikes get sold.
Did you sell all 8 bikes?
We didn't sell a one. We didn't sell a one. We didn't sell one the first week, and we didn't sell one the second week. I was like, what the hell have I gotten myself into? And then the holiday weekend hit, and half of them went out the door. And, I remember we were in there, those first several deals working until midnight.
Yeah.
And that's when
So it took you like 6 months to sell your first 4 bikes.
No, it was about 2 weeks.
Okay, 2 weeks.
Yeah,
okay,
2 weeks.
okay.
But the first 2 weeks I didn't sell a one.
Okay.
And I'm thinking, what have we gotten into? But on week 3, that's when we went into the holiday weekend, and it just and suddenly things kind of started to hit.
You said holiday, I'm thinking like Christmas.
Right. Yeah. So it was pretty wild because and I can't tell you, I was so proud because we took this building downtown Greensboro and we converted it. It's very, very similar to Mike Wolf's American Picker building. And, I would walk around in there at night and think, man, I can't believe I built this. This was a hollow shell. Just like what you were telling about the studio here, just a few months ago.
Yeah.
And now it's this real thing. And so it was really, we drew a lot of inspiration from our own experience at that point. But Polaris leading the way with Indian I thought they did a great job. Now, there were some things where we were kind of floundering, like the second month. Well, actually, yes, second, third month, we had a goal. Our goal was sell 9 bikes. And so I only have 9 bikes. This is my profile. I've got to sell them all or it was 10. No, it was 10. So my profile was 9 bikes and the goal was 10. So I'm telling the rep, says, how's this possible? I got to sell them all in the first week because at that time, the turnaround to get another bike was about 3 weeks.
Yeah, but how do you replace them?
Right. How do I get that 10th bike? Nobody explained to you because you need to do a non-profile order. And I was like, and all of a sudden, man, there's so much about this I don't know. But we were learning, and we were learning at warp speed. And being an entrepreneur and coming from that type of background, it did help. But my point there is even the reps were a little green with the brand.
Yeah.
So we all just kind of grew together. And that was actually a good thing for me. Now, somebody else that had been an experienced operator that came in with a relaunch brand like that, I see where they could have been very, very frustrated, but it worked out really well for me.
Yeah, you were a good fit for them. You weren't jaded.
It was
so
perfect.
you were actually excited about the brand and the new adventure that you were taking.
Absolutely. And for all I knew, the way that company was doing things is the only way it was done in the industry.
Right.
Had no way to know. It took me about a year before I started saying no.
So tell me a little bit about, you'd made a comment about you were a previous entrepreneur and that is actually what helped you in your venture in Powersports. Give me some detail about how you think being an entrepreneur actually helped you move into the Powersports space. What was the benefits? What was the negatives?
Well, 100%. It really boiled back down to, just having a good understanding of customer satisfaction and customer interaction. Now, granted, I was coming from the fitness industry and it was very, very service oriented. And now we're shifting those skills to something that's a little bit more product based. Initially, it felt that way. As time went on, I learned, no, really, we have a product, but I'm still in the service based business.
Yep.
And it's sort of like the more you learn, the more you uncover.
Yep.
Right. And come to find out that I had more of the skills that were necessary than I really would have guessed.
Yeah. And
it was really it goes back again to the communication, being able to communicate and get a message across. And those things, they're timeless and they're not a fad. That's a fashion, and they transcend industries.
Right.
Just the ability to communicate.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was the main thing. And then just understanding, simple stuff, not confusing your net and your gross, simple stuff like that, understanding overhead and how to control overhead. And being that the studios that I had built every one of them from ground up, except for one I had purchased from another operator, but the rest of them I built from ground up. So I was familiar with that process of launching something from the rip. And when I finished building a Powersports dealership, which interestingly, and I was very fortunate I had the other business because I did not take a paycheck for 18 months. 18 months.
I was going to ask that next. How long did it take you to become profitable?
It was 18 months before I felt comfortable, taking a paycheck. And which I will say, though, we were profitable within the first 6 months.
Okay.
But I had gone all in, man. I had cashed out my retirement. I had maxed out my credit cards. I had taken all the savings in the other business, all the personal savings. And luckily I have a wife that was very supportive.
Yeah.
My wife, Ellen, I told her, I says, I'm young enough. If I mess this up, I'll get it back.
Right.
And I said, and she said, okay, go for it. She said, the only rule is you can't touch my retirement.
That's the backup.
That's the backup.
Yeah,
That's the
we
backup.
call that around here, Monty. It's called cliff diving.
It's the entrepreneurial cliff diving.
Yeah. Yes. And so we just kind of went at it sort of, in just a fearless way. And sometimes when you're backed up like that, it is. And you told me you're a golfer. You guys are golfers, and one of my favorite golfers, Lee Trevino. And Lee Trevino used to talk about how he didn't know how good he was until he had a $5 Nassau on the line and he only had $1 in his pocket. And so I felt a lot like that. And I said, well, failure's not an option. And so we're working around the clock to try to make it successful. Yeah. But I one thing that I did, I want to share this with the viewers, that's first 6 months it took to really get into, to kind of get out of the red. And the next 12 months there was profit, but I had really spent most of my life working from a financial perspective that I did not want to be in debt. I don't like debt. I'm not crazy about it. There's good debt, there's bad debt. And I was carrying way more debt than I had ever carried in my life. And
was it good debt or bad debt?
Well, it ended up being good debt.
Yeah. What's the definition between good debt and bad debt?
Well, I think that, your bad debt is where you have nothing tangible to show for it.
Right.
Right. And your good debt is where there's a definite asset behind it. And so that's why I say at the time, I didn't know what kind of debt I had, because if it failed, it's clearly bad debt. I'm still on the hook for it.
True.
With no real asset to back it up. Right. So I spent that after that first 6 months, the next 12 months, aggressively trying to pay down my debt. And I just want to say that I felt like I was doing something that was so financially responsible. Right. But then when it came tax time, it turns out I was profitable. And so the account's like, hey, we owe the government this. And I said, no, that's not right. So I pushed it back. I said, that can't be right. And he goes, no, Monty, you owe this. I said, no, Jared, I don't. And he goes, why do you think you don't? I said, because that money's nowhere around.
Yeah.
And I said, it would be in the checking account.
Yeah. But you made the money and you paid the debt.
Correct.
If you're paying debt, that is not tax-free money.
Correct.
You made the money, so you technically have to pay tax on it.
And I wasn't thinking about that at the time. I was just thinking about launching this business. I'm in debt up to my eyeballs. I got to get this right. I'm dependent on good decisions. My family's dependent on good decisions. I want to get back to where we can get this back under control. And so I was doing it extremely aggressively.
Yeah.
And then that's when I was like, luckily I was able to allocate some of that debt back into the checking account.
Okay.
To get through that, second tax season. And, but it was a lesson learned
for sure.
And that's just something that you don't really think about. You think you're making the right decisions on those things, but and since then I've learned a lot more. Currently I'm in about 70% of the way through an MBA program. And I think, man, I wish I had done this training back 20 years ago, and just it's opened my eyes to some of the financial decisions, along the way. But there, that's formal training. But there's also the MBA from the street, right? I heard Ryan Dallas when you had him on for the podcast. He had me kind of tickled because he kept saying he had his PhD in Powersports. And I said, well, this is
He does.
I said, this is awesome, man. This is a self-awarded degree, which is really cool. But it's tracking, right? I'm like, that's a good way to say that, because of his vast experience. So there's different ways to learn those lessons. Formally, a lot of times they can help you keep from making future mistakes, but you can also learn them the hard way. But I think the best way still is with a good mentor, though.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's a lot easier to learn from somebody else that's already made those mistakes than to learn them yourself. I mean, that's what has helped me tremendously, and why I'm so young and where I'm at, because I decided one day that I'm going to learn from somebody else and their mistakes than to go through this whole long process and learn everything on my own and land on my face. Yes, I've had to land on my face a few times, but I think if you can get a good mentor and actually take the advice that they have to give, you can overstep these, pitfalls that most people deal with.
You're going to turbocharge your trajectory.
Yeah.
But life's full of lessons. Like a big lesson I learned from the martial arts studios when we were expanding. We opened one in one area, and everybody, they had a lot of people in my ear. They're like, listen, you need to expand here. This is a growing area. You need to be there before, in on the ground level. You've heard that term. It was probably our weakest location. And I made the decision then. I said, I will never, ever open another business in an area that's growing. I will go and open it in an area that's grown, because I'm going to be making the same effort. The thing is that when it's growing, we now have entered in this unknown element of everybody else.
Right.
And why is it growing? What's going on around it? You have to be very, very informed. Is there industries coming in that we think that is on this trajectory? If you've done that research and you trust it and you really have defined that timeline, okay, go for it. But if you haven't, then you may be floundering around with an area you thought over the next 24 months was really going to be something when it's really on a 12-year trajectory.
Right.
And the second thing that I learned kind of similar to that was after I opened the dealership and went through those first 18 months, I said, hey, if we expand, I will never open another one of these from scratch. I will only go and expand through an existing dealership.
Yeah.
Which is what we did the second time. In 2017, I bought the dealership in High Point, and we had some internal expansion before that. We were lucky enough to be able to add Slingshot as a product line, and then the dealership in High Point had the Victory motorcycle brand, and we bought that portion of their business and brought it over with Indian. But
Into Greensboro.
Okay. Yeah, into Greensboro. And interestingly, I had at the end of 2016, I said, okay, I'm ready to go to the next portion of this plan, which the plan was to have to try within the first 8 years to have 5 locations. And so there was an Indian dealership in Alpharetta. It was part of the Freedom group.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So
Yep.
I was meeting with those guys.
Very familiar with Kevin.
Yes, with Kevin. Great guy.
Kevin's a mentor of mine.
Is that right?
Yep.
He's a great dude. Kevin Lackey is just good man. Very informative. He put me with his financial group the accounting department, I guess you would say. But
Did you talk to Natalie?
Probably. Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Natalie's a baller.
Because it's been a minute.
Yeah.
And so, but all of his interests were in Texas, and he had this one store over in Georgia.
Yep.
And I was interested in opening up another Indian store. So we went back and forth, and we couldn't really quite bring it together. And so it kind of, it went to a certain point, and then we just weren't able to close it up. And it was so odd. The store in High Point, North Carolina, the couple that I had purchased the Indian brand from and brought over to Greensboro called me and said, we're really wanting to move to Pennsylvania. And would you be interested in the store? And we had this conversation before, but it wasn't a good time. You know, timing is important. I said, yeah, maybe so. So we sat down and talked, and that's how I ended up with the store there in High Point. And it had a second showroom that was originally designed and laid out for Victory motorcycles. And of course, Victory had disappeared by that point. And so we went through about another 4.5 years. And then eventually we moved everything under one roof to that more modern facility.
Yeah.
And that's how everything's in High Point now.
So the place in High Point, that was the existing location of the people that you bought.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, they were there. And
So that was in 2017.
2017, bought the dealership, and the building I did not own at that time. I had a 5-year option.
Yep.
And about 4 years and some change later, we purchased the building.
Gotcha.
And then I owned the building for about 6 or 8 months before we combined everything under one roof.
Okay.
And that was actually a really good thing because originally that was location 2, and we were thinking about location 3. And once I had 2 locations, I realized I had new goals. I no longer was interested in the multi. I kept thinking, man, how do I get back to one location? So that was, I have a good friend of mine. I won't say the name of the business, but he owns one of the biggest tow truck businesses in the state of North Carolina. And his dad started the business, and then he ran it. And I think they had 350 tow trucks, and they sold it to a group, and then they ended up buying it back. It's the craziest thing. But he said, when I was talking to him about the 350 tow trucks, he says, my dad would say when my dad would say we had 349 too many. And I thought that was kind of funny, but the dad had built it from one truck.
Yeah.
And so it made a lot of financial sense for us once I decided, no, I'm not going to open store 3 and 4 and 5, because 2 stores is a little tricky. I really think that the hot spot is when you at 3 or more.
Yeah.
Because at that point, there's usually, if they're run right, the funds are there to have them properly staffed.
Yeah. The infrastructure.
Correct. And the 2 stores I had were close enough, 15 miles, 25-minute drive, close enough to each other. I'm running back and forth in GM in both stores.
Yeah.
Right. And I was getting run ragged. So when we combined everything, it reduced my overhead, sales went up, the synergy was way better, and it was a great move for us.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how that came about.
There was a lot of good meat and potatoes in that introduction.
Yeah, right.
Oh my goodness.
Fantastic.
Wow. For those that are optimistic and listening, you're welcome.
Well, thanks, man.
Goodness gracious, that was killer.
All right, Monty. You shot my heavy bag downstairs.
Yes.
I enjoy boxing,
Right.
a little bit of kickboxing here and there. But one thing I've never heard of, verbal judo.
Right.
So why don't you educate us and the viewers? Apparently, there's only 2 rules.
Correct.
That are important.
Correct. There may be 50 rules of verbal judo. I only know the first 2 because that's what I was taught. But growing up, I had a neighbor that was a very nice lady, and she is a dentist. And she would come over, visit, was good friends of the family. And I think when I was probably 18, 19, I think I was at Carolina at the time, and she's a Carolina graduate. So we kind of had this connection. And for whatever reason, well, I know why. She was in the process of growing her dental practice, and she had hired consultants, and she was starting to go and participate in industry organization meetings. And so she was picking up a lot of valuable input, and particularly a lot of leadership skills. And she says, I've got to tell you what I recently learned. She said, I want you to know the number 1 rule of verbal judo. And I said, oh, wow, this sounds great. I said, okay, what's the number 1 rule of verbal judo? She said, whoever is asking the questions controls the conversation. And I thought, wow, even as a teenager, I thought that's interesting. That's a very good point. And so being curious minded like I was, I said, so do you know the second rule of verbal judo? She says, yes, I did learn the second rule of verbal judo. And I said, okay, what's that? And she said, number 2 rule is to go back and master the first rule. And I said, oh, okay.
Okay.
And, you know, I live my life by that. Like my management style is what I call manage by walking around. And I do that. I'm very involved with what's going on in the dealership. That's just how it is. Now, and I ask a lot of questions. And I usually probably do control the conversation. But I've learned over time the limits to that philosophy, which is I want to ask you questions, but I have to be very careful about how I do it because I don't want it to come off to you that I'm questioning you.
Yep.
Right. So I want to find out from a curious perspective and something where we're working together.
Yep.
But a lot of people are very sensitive to being questioned, and that sensitivity can enter very early into a question.
Yep.
And so a lot of times when working with team members, you know, I've had to learn to mitigate that and control it and use it in such a way that everybody's in their comfort zone. I get the information I'm looking for. You're still validated, and we move forward.
You know, I got a little add to that. When you're talking about staying in control of a conversation, which is vital, if you want to be in control of that conversation, we've all been taught, we're all from the South, is it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Sure.
And when you ask a question,
You're talking about
always,
like if you say y'all,
or you say or
he ain't got no,
or cinches, you know, those types of things.
Right.
But my point is there's a lot of different ways you can ask the same question. And I had a mentor that actually, I've heard that exact same statement when he says, I lead by walking around. That's actually, I heard that when I was probably 18 from a guy.
Sure.
It was one of my, in my opinion, one of my favorite mentors that I've ever had. And he told me, he said, hey, I'm going to ask you this. I'm going to ask you 2 different ways. And I'm going to tell you how you feel. And he said, why do you do that way?
Right.
And I didn't even know what he was asking me why I did it, but I was immediately pissed off. I was like, what do you mean? Why do I do it that way? And he said, hey, how can I do it the same way you did it?
Mm-hmm.
He asked me the same question.
Yeah, that's right.
But one way I thought, my God, he wants to know how I did it. And the other way I thought, fuck you.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
For sure.
Like it's the same question. And I think that's something, you know, we talk a lot about leadership and what it takes to build a really good team. And I think that to build a good team, you have to be hypersensitive to those types of conversations, because if you want to address somebody that's, say, doing something maybe poorly, right? It's not, Brandon, why would you do it that way? It's, hey, how could I do it the same way you did it?
Yeah.
And then in explaining that to me, Now you're not pissed off about it.
Yeah.
In explaining that to me, you're going to realize the fault in how you screwed up whatever you screwed up.
Yep.
But you're going to do it in a way where you're going to say at the end, by the time you get 50% of the way through explaining to me how I can do it the way you did it, you're going to say, yeah, but you know what? There's probably a better way to do this. And then we get to work on it together.
Yeah.
And that's the real, you want to talk about being a leader.
Absolutely.
That's real high level leadership stuff.
It is. My dad was a head football coach and high school head football coach. My mom was a high school head basketball coach. And, you know, growing up watching them interact with their players, you know, intuitively I picked up on the fact that for both of them, their style was to communicate a little bit differently from player to player. And, you know, there's sometimes maybe a player that you do have to grab by the face mask and pull them in tight or give them a little shaking.
Yeah.
But you
Just
know,
keep pounding.
right. But those folks, a lot of times, you know, you give them that grace and until it comes to that, because they're not able to communicate it any other way. But initially, everybody out of the gate, I think you're 100% right. You've got to be sensitive to it, and a key to communication anyway is that critical word, empathizing. You know, let me try to put myself in your shoes for a moment before I speak.
Yeah.
Now you have to be careful with that too as a manager, because a lot of times you know if you have to be careful not to pre-think other people's thoughts, right?
Yep.
Like if you did something I'm not crazy about, I have to be careful not to say, I bet you were thinking this, because now you're in trouble with me twice for what you did and what you were thinking.
Yep.
So let me pull back on that and just come at you. And assumption can be a very bad.
So maybe the third rule of verbal judo.
Oh, we're making this up now.
I like it.
Okay.
And I think it ties great into what you both just said, is listening with intent. Yeah. Not listening to answer.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Don't get me started on that. That's what I'm known for.
Listen, I have, this is a skill that I've had to actually work on a lot through my career, because with what we do, there's always so many ideas. And there are certain points where I've become very stuck in my ways of, I know what works. I know what's best. This is what we're going to do. And the way I respond to that dictates how that relationship's going to play out. Not because of the way I know the answer, but am I actually listening to what they're saying so I can understand what they're trying to accomplish?
Right.
Not
or
in the sense of,
are you just trying to listen to respond?
Exactly.
That's the two types of listeners.
Not am I just listening so that I can, hey, no, this is the way that we get to what you want to do. It's like, no, let me listen intently so I know what you're trying to accomplish. And even if I do think, you know, my way is better, at least I understand where you're trying to get to. And I can present that in an acceptable format, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'll take credit for verbal judo rule number 3. All right, what you got next, B? I know
All right, so number one question: what do you think, Monty? What do you think separates great dealerships from average ones?
Ooh,
is it leadership, culture, process, people, or something else? And what do most dealerships get wrong?
Well, that's a
cannot pick all
deep
three.
question. How long is this podcast?
That's a big one.
As long as you need it to be. Dude.
Well, I got to tell you, I think the dealership world is no different than any other industry, and no different than any other business, whether it be large or small. And I think that particularly in the power sports industry, we have access to so much more information now to help us grow our businesses. We have more metrics, we have more studies, we have more conjecture even. And I think that your better dealerships are the ones that can navigate that, and they can understand the difference when navigating this information between fantasy and reality. Okay. And it's great to go and sit with consultants. It's great to be in the 20 group. It's great to bounce ideas off. But at the end of the day, the leader and the team ultimately is going to have to be a decision maker, because every idea can't be implemented right now. Yep. Every idea may not be perfect for my market. Some of the ideas you're presented are just things that are recycled that you already are doing or that you know won't work for you. And so I think the successful dealers, they have a system, and that system starts with good, clear leadership and good, clear decision making. And you can't do everything. You know, that's how, if you go to a restaurant, you order everything on the menu, you're going to get fat, right? You know, and not necessarily fat in a good way, right? So you have to pick and choose, and you've got to be a little bit strategic about that. And sometimes that has to do with our market, but sometimes it also has to do with our team. And so that, you know, you have to know your strengths and your weaknesses. And that's what I think. I think at the end of the day, it's taking advantage of the tools that are out there, but navigating them in a way that works best for you.
I think that's maybe an answer we haven't heard before, gentlemen. Like decision making being the deciding factor between a great dealership and an average one. Everybody can come up with ideas, right? And there's a ton of them out there, and a lot of them are good, but like you just said, maybe not all of them are good for you. And so somebody that can make those decisions, I think, is tenfold above.
Well, there's two kind of ways to operate any type of business. It can be systems based, or it can be personality based, right? And personality based is going to be pretty solid for the guy that's a one man show electrician, right? You know him, you trust him, and so on and so forth. But that business that he's built, it probably has his name on it. And most likely, if he's not there, it's going to be difficult for it to continue, because everything rode on that one personality. But when you have a good system in place, and you have good management in place, and you have good leadership in place, and everybody is put into those programs, now you give them the freedom to bring out the highlights of their personality. But it's done under a proper umbrella. Right.
Here's a question I have for you. Do you think one way is better than the other?
I think it's a mix. I think you need a mix, but I think what is important is the order. I think you need the system first, and the personality follows. I really believe that. And of course, anybody with any sense that knows about sales know that they want their salespeople to represent and almost build themselves as their own brand as a salesperson. But at the same time, we need to pause for a moment, reflect on something. We call it, you know, this popular thing a few years back, it's called the Chick-fil-A way, right? Well, here's the thing about Chick-fil-A. Okay, you could go to your favorite Chick-fil-A, and you know everybody in there, and there's a smiling face, and you connect with them. But for whatever reason, everybody could quit on a Tuesday, and a whole new crew could come in on Wednesday. And the truth is, if the Chick-fil-A was run the way that they want it to, you're not really going to notice that much difference. Because it's still run at a high standard. And so that's why I say the system needs to be in place first. And then when you have a rock star of a personality as a salesperson, man, they've got both sets of tools. And that's why I think the order is most important, more so than one or the other.
There was an interesting term that I learned from my stint in home improvement. They called them chucking a truck.
Right.
And that's talking about, you mentioned the electrician, right? The guy that's got his name on the truck, and like, he might have an LLC, he might not, right? But everybody knows him that's ever worked with him because he does great work. The problem is chucking a truck will only ever be chucking a truck.
Right.
But if you're building a task force of ultimate salespeople, you want to figure out how to get that chuck to work on your truck.
That's right.
And I think that the military is a great analogy of what a good sales team is, because you mentioned something earlier when you said sometimes it's about the market, sometimes it's about your sales team. And we've all been in environments where everybody's like, oh my God, what's going to happen with the economy? What's going to happen with sales?
Right.
The military doesn't say, hey, what's going to happen on the horizon? The military says, are we the best we can possibly be right now? Because if somebody poses a threat to us, we don't know where it's going to be. We don't know when it's going to be. We don't know if we're going to have to get there on a boat or a plane or however. We just want to make sure that we are the best we can possibly be.
That's right.
And that's why every sales team that I've been a part of since I've subscribed to that mentality has been not about anything else outside of, if I don't feel like that my team's solid first, I'm not going to bitch about anything. Because if I'm bitching about anything else, outside of me figuring out how to make that sales team as best as it can possibly be right then and right there. I'm at the market's grace, because I'll do great if the market's good, and I'll do horrible if the market's bad.
Right.
So at that point, I'm just a boat floating on the tide.
Yep.
That's all it is. That sales team and the team of leadership in that dealership has got to worry about themselves before they worry about anything else.
Yeah.
Because if they're not ready, that dealership is subject to the tide. And that's a tricky business to be in.
It is.
I think that's what a lot of dealerships get wrong. To your point, is they're just chucking a truck, right? That everything rises and falls on that one person, and they don't ever build a system or a process that other people can work in.
That's right.
So they're ultimately always stranded in their job, right? So as entrepreneurs, like, we don't want to create a new job for ourselves. We want to create a business that serves us.
That's right.
So I think if anything can be taken away from this, it's like, stop being the guy that runs everything. Build a system, and then build a team that helps you live the life that you want to live. Looking back, what's one lesson that made you a much better dealership owner?
Over the tenure of my time, there's so many things, but we're pinpointing it down to one key lesson. And my staff may disagree with this, but the one biggest takeaway that being a dealer principal has done for me is helped me learn patience on a new level. And I still work on that every single day. I came from an industry where I literally, with my staff and my customers, I was allowed to strike them. And so,
you know what's funny is I know you've been talking about your self-defense stuff, and I immediately was like, holy shit.
Right.
He was hitting people.
Not only was I allowed to do it, it was encouraged.
You know what? I didn't like this. I fucking enjoyed it.
First couple customer complaints, and I'm like, and I'm thinking, put your gloves on. And so, I had to kind of pull that back, or, staff members like, oh, I don't want to do it that way. I was like, oh, that's disrespectful. Then it's like, well, hold on a minute. We're not going back in feudal times here. Right. So, but definitely the biggest thing I've taken away from personal growth is learning a different level of patience, because I have an amazing staff, and they are everyone wired a little different, but they each have these incredible talents.
Yep.
Talents I don't have. My talent was finding them and putting them together. And the same with the customers. A lot of sometimes customers, their presentation maybe come at you in a way that you don't really want. But if you can step back and figure out what the heck is the message here, and let me take this thing that's a little bit of a negative, if it is a negative, and what can I take from it?
Yeah.
Let's get you fixed up, but then later let's have a team meeting and figure out how we can avoid this conversation going forward. Right. So I always say in the dealership, it's very, very important that our current self is doing things to make life easier for our future self. And I'm like, 5 minutes invested right now might save you 30 minutes or an hour or a very uncomfortable conversation later.
Yep.
And so that ability to plan ahead and look ahead and stay out in front of things is important. Now, again, from a communication perspective, if you have some younger staff members, sometimes that can be a little bit of a challenge. I grew up in the generation where most of us were latchkey kids. We came home, we cooked dinner, and the job was don't burn the house down. So people my age in our early 50s or older, we're usually trying to think 3 or 4 steps ahead. We grew up trying not to burn the house down. We were in there by ourselves. Some of the younger folks, they don't necessarily appreciate that. They want to address the problem if it ever comes. Why are we worried about that?
Yeah.
Why are we worried about that? That's not a problem yet. And I'm like, no, we always are wanting to stay out in the front.
Yeah.
That's our current self looking out for our future self. And so just the planning, and I think is something that it has gifted to me.
Yeah.
Dude, you know who taught me that lesson?
Who's that?
My fiance. You want to know how she taught me that lesson?
Was it with the whip?
Shout out to my beautiful fiance. Dishes in the evening. Because and she always says this. She was like, I'll thank my morning self tomorrow.
Yeah, that's
to
right.
do them tonight.
Yep.
And it's impactful, right? You're just like,
It is.
yeah, I got 5 minutes now. Just do this now. And tomorrow I'll thank myself for it.
Absolutely. She's a very
So-
smart lady.
You said that one of your talents was taking the right people and putting the right people in the right places.
Yeah.
How important do you think that is? Because the reality is, I think a lot of us, like whether you own a dealership or some other business, us as people, we have this ego. We think we're good at everything.
Right.
But the reality is, like, our businesses thrive when we put the right sales manager in place.
Yeah.
We put the right GM in place. We put the right salesperson in place. And what I've noticed is I've hired people that are better at doing those specific jobs that I am, and I have reaped the benefits. But what I've had to do is set my ego aside,
right,
and make sure that I make the right hire.
Yeah. Get out of your own way sometimes.
Yeah.
It's the truth, you know, and for me, ego gets in the way sometimes from the fact that I come from a coaching background and a background as a trainer. And certainly with staff, I have to really watch, because I can be arrogant in such a way that I believe I could take anybody and train them to do anything well. I have that kind of confidence in my coaching ability.
Yeah.
And over the last 12, 13 years, I've learned that's not always the case. And so there's probably been some folks over time that maybe it would have been better for them and myself both if I had cut them loose. But you know, I wanted to stay in there for the long haul. But most of the time what happens, I've gotten better about the fact of figuring out, hey, you're amazing, you're talented. This is not a good fit for you, but I've got a different position in the dealership where you would fit.
Yeah.
And so, and one thing about my dealership, and anybody watching that's been there I would hope would attest to, is I have a very high retention rate with my employees. And a lot of times in our industry, we talk about retention, and a lot of times we're talking about on the customer side. But the retention on the employee side is critical, because that is when people come into your dealership and they want it to feel like it's their second place, you know, almost like Cheers. Their Cheers, you guys may be too young to remember the show Cheers.
That's a great reference.
Yeah, you know, this is their place away from home where they're comfortable. They like going, even just stopping by to hang out. And if it's the same familiar faces, that's a plus to that. You know, again, that's that personality sliding in after the system is in place. But you know, I have a really high retention rate of employees, and I think it is because I'm willing to stick in there while we train through something. And if that doesn't work, let's see if we got somewhere else within the dealership that we can plug in your strong points. Doesn't mean we can't come back over here. I mean, by the time it's over, it's said and done with, you might be running the whole place. But right now, this is not working, and I've learned to tap out a little bit sooner on some things.
Yeah.
And so
I've seen to specifically to that point, I've seen owners that are afraid to hire the right people because they know that they're going to challenge their decisions.
Yeah.
If you ideally hire the right people in your organization, you might say something one day that real right guy might be like, I hear what you're saying, and you sign the check, but think about this.
Yeah.
And as an owner, if you have the right person in place and they never have anything to say that comes from their own dome, you probably have the wrong person in place.
Yeah.
And that's
powerful.
that is a challenge as an owner. And I'm telling you, I've seen almost every owner that I've worked with, I've seen have a little bit, range of challenge in, okay, who am I hiring for what position? Because what backlash do I want to have to deal with when I just want to go do it my way?
Right.
But then I've actually fallen into a position where I've got the real right guy in that position that's actually got a better view of what the choice needs to be in this situation. So I'm going to actually have to step aside and say, you're right. Let's do it your way. And then if it fails, the responsibility is on you.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think if you're building real leaders in your dealership or in your organization, you have to have that. You have to allow people to go and make their own mistakes. Because if I was building an organization and I just told everybody, hey, Chris, this is how you're going to do it, he would never believe in it. He might believe
Not
half
my
of what
idea.
I'm saying, but it's not his idea.
Not my
When then
idea.
the reality is, he could probably go do he could go do a better job than I could at doing certain positions. And that's okay with me because because I'm going to benefit he's going to benefit, the customers are going to benefit, and the staff's going to benefit. But a lot of people, like, I think, can't get out of their own way.
No, it's fair. I mean, you don't see the board of directors for a Fortune 500 company down on the assembly line,
Right.
or
Right.
even in the C-suite office.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day, they're the final. They're the line in the sand.
Yeah.
But they go out and they spend the time and the money to hire the right people. So,
Dude, if I tried to tell Blake how to run an ad, we would be out of business at this point. If Blake took every idea that I had and took it with it, we'd be in trouble.
and sometimes the real secret sauce is in the middle, right? That person that challenges you a little bit. You have one thought, they have another thought, and sometimes it's just, it's not one or the other.
Yeah.
Sometimes
It's a combination.
Yeah, sometimes 1 + 1 is 3.
Correct.
And
In fact,
that's the thing.
if you don't have anybody to challenge you, I would dare to say that your business is probably in trouble. If nobody
Absolutely.
around
Well,
you has
you
courage.
listen. You don't want to be a chuck in a truck either.
Right.
As an owner,
Yeah.
you don't want to be the chuck in a truck owner. You don't want to be the guy that says,
Yeah.
if it doesn't fit in my toolbox, I'm not bringing it.
You're right.
Good point.
Because whenever you show up to a house and you got your little toolbox that you're so proud of and everything's where it's supposed to be, and they've got a problem you've never seen before that you're not prepared for, they ain't calling you back.
No.
Right. Right. You had your chance.
You had your shot.
I got one for Monty.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of more expansive, not necessarily your dealership, but state of the power sports industry in 2026. What do you think?
I think it's on the right trajectory. I really do. I mean, in the last 6 years, we've seen just unprecedented craziness, right? From COVID to post-COVID. And, a lot of times now, even going back, and I've done that more recently, going back and looking at certain metrics and certain sales goals that we did or did not meet back in 2018, and comparing that forward and seeing, just kind of removing this block of time and saying, hey, let me measure us by that and see where we are with it. I think we're headed in the right direction. I think that that begins honestly with the manufacturers feeling like they're in a more comfortable space. They were a little unsure about what type of profiling to put on us for a while. Every one of them are spending big dollars on highly educated actuaries, forensic accountants, etc. And for a lot of big companies, they're going back and they're trying to find this average in that first year and a half and 2 years after COVID. They're trying to find a balance. But the way they did that was to say, hey, by the way, all those computer chips came in and now you've got a profile. Remember we told you we would never cram inventory down your throat again? Well, your profile is now 30% higher than it ever was. And suddenly they're getting back right on that. And I'm sure it's because of selling through some of the decisions that had to be made and so on and so forth. So I think it begins there, but I think we're tracking right. Certainly consumer interest rates are higher than they were 3 and 4 years ago. Like my dad says, when he buys something, my dad owns a grading business, so he owns a lot of big equipment. And he often said, he's getting ready to turn 80, but his same statement he has made for years: let me settle into these new payments. Once I settle into them, we'll be in a better position. I've always thought to myself, from a mathematical perspective, they're going to be the same in 6 months as they are now. But it's a mental thing.
Yeah.
Correct. And I think people have settled in, quote unquote, to the little bit higher interest rates. And it's the same thing, just like mortgage rates. I mean, mortgage rates now are around 6.5%, something like that. Still historically low.
Yeah, true. Yeah, true. But nowhere near the 2.99 or the 199.
The spoiled average.
Yeah.
I feel like we went from what everybody thought, like 2020, 2019 to 2023, we were on an exponential curve for all my math folks out there.
Yes.
And that's in no way, shape, or form sustainable, but I do feel like we're on a more linear path now. Straight line, kind of gradual, which I think is a lot more sustainable. To your point, to the OEMs, the demand planning in this industry has been a huge issue for a long time. Still don't think it's perfect, but I do feel like they're getting better. And I think that helps dealership help. You know what I mean? I think it makes everybody at this table's life a little bit easier. we can rely on our manufacturers to give us what we actually need and not base that data off of an exponential graph that, to be honest, we all knew was not real and was not going to last forever, you know?
Correct.
So totally agree. I feel like we're on a much more sustainable growth now than we were through that 4 or 5 year period where it was just absolutely exponential.
And on that demand curve you're talking about, how are you feeling with that regression in elasticity? No, I'm just messing.
What did he just say?
Hello. Talking about elasticity
Why
from the
are you
judo
sending me
guy.
30 razors when I sell 10 a year every year? Call that regression.
If you bought a struggling dealership tomorrow, what are the first 3 things you would fix?
First 3 things. Well, as an entrepreneur, I often go in. I'm always looking for an opportunity.
Yep.
And so, I will just speak from, personal experience, but we'll replace what I was looking at with just widgets. Okay. Because I was looking at a business that's not a power sports business. And so I went into this business recently. It's in Chapel Hill, and, I spent about a day and a half in the business, more or less, away from the employees, but more just floating around as more or less like a consumer type of perspective. And so the first thing that I assessed was the staffing. Okay. And it wasn't really about the ability of the staffing. It wasn't so much about the quality first. It was the quantity. We have the right amount of staffing, or we don't have the right amount of staffing. And that's not, sometimes that can be a little bit of a judgment, because somebody new coming in, it may not be the right amount of staffing for the previous person, might have been perfect. Right.
Yeah.
And the second thing that I was looking at was the inventory position. So I'm wanting to see, what do we have here? What's moving and what's not? What's our inventory position? And then the third thing that I was looking at with this business is, what's the current marketing plan? How are we looking on the marketing side?
Yeah.
And so it was really thinking about right sizing the staffing, right personing the staffing, and then the inventory position flowing on into the marketing position.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of opportunities. And so, if a business could be struggling a little bit, but it could be because, again, it's in the area where it's never going to be successful, or it could just be because it needs some fresh eyes and some tweaking, plain and simple. So, yeah, if I were going into a struggling dealership, I would go in it with honest eyes. Are there things here that can turn this around?
Yeah.
Or if it's doing solid, take it to the next level. Or is it really, are we really just like, is this a lost cause?
Yeah.
If it's shit, it's shit.
I don't think there's many
fair.
lost causes out there, though. Like, we're
so.
all so protected by our manufacturers.
Right.
And like our PMAs, like they do kind of protect us in a way. So I don't think any dealership is a lost cause.
No.
I think it's a leadership issue.
For as much flack as we give them, yes, the OEMs do a good job of protecting, I think,
For the most part,
for
yeah.
the most part, right? I think you hit it on the head with 2 of those things. I think it's the people,
Mm-hmm.
and then I think it's who see us, right?
Right.
People even know we exist. Right?
Okay. What's more important, sales
Oh yeah.
or marketing?
Well, it's kind of a chicken and egg thing, right? So,
Correct.
Are we 100% on that question?
Oh yeah, for sure.
I think we're 100% on that question.
Yeah.
I will tell you a super quick story. This will take 30 seconds, but when going back to May the 3rd, 2014, the day I opened, I was so jealous of not 9 months later. I was the second Indian dealership in North Carolina. There was an existing Indian dealership that had been with the previous manufacturer. That was a holdover. And about 9 months later, after I opened, Ride Now Powersports down in Concord picked up Indian, which I was like, man, that's a bummer, because they told us that these need to be standalone Indian dealerships. They're going to be like smaller dealerships when compared to a Harley dealership, boutique style, focusing on Indian 100%. I'm like, that's a big multi-line dealership. And I was super jealous when they opened up, not because it was a competitor, but it was purely because of the fact that I knew intuitively that the day they opened up with that brand, they already were going to have multiple buyers
Right.
in the hopper, because
Yep.
for the 6 months while they were planning it, they were able to market
Yep.
to their current database. And second of all, they were doing such volume that, I mean, in every product category, they probably had 2 to 3 customers they could count on that month, just because they were back in their buying cycle.
Yep.
And I was like, man, I opened up to nothing from nothing.
Yep.
Day one, I had to start with no customers. And I'm like, I'm so jealous those guys are plugging that brand in and they already had this big database.
Mm-hmm.
So, they already had the existing sales, and that, if they did it right, I don't know, because I've never been part of that group, but if they did it right, they marketed to their sales database
So they do
already.
it right. They do
Yeah.
it right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that was the trick.
They got a ton of
Well,
funds.
yeah.
A lot of resources.
Yeah. So to go back to the question, what's more important, sales or marketing? And as a marketer, I would definitely say marketing first as my initial instinct, because we have to drive the traffic to be able to have the ability to sell to the consumer. But what I've also learned is you can be really good at marketing and drive the traffic and not have the sales team in place to convert.
Yeah.
Right. So I was in that same scenario in my past life, right? We got really good at driving traffic, and there was customers on the showroom. There were leads that weren't being contacted. There were the phone call, the phone was ringing. We couldn't answer the phone. And I'm like, we have to stop this, because we've drove this traffic, but we don't have the sales team and the infrastructure to convert it.
Right.
So we're spending all these dollars, $8, $10, $12, $15,000 a month in marketing, but I don't have the sales team and the infrastructure to convert it. So instinctively, I would say marketing is more important than sales. But if you don't have a sales team that can convert the leads, the phone calls, the walk-in, and all the other shit,
Right.
you're just spending wasteless dollars. So we have a lot of conversations with dealers, and kind of one of the questions we ask them is like, okay, we know that we can drive more traffic. We know we can get you more phone calls, more store walk-ins, more leads. But at the end of the day, if we do our job correctly and you can't convert it to put more money to your bottom line, you're going to think we're doing a bad job.
I mean, yeah. In fact, it's one of our qualifying questions. It's can you handle, if we do our job correctly, right? And obviously, I'm trying to say this without any ego in it, because I'm so confident in what we do. It's like, if we do our job correctly, can you make the most of it?
Yeah.
And honestly, we've had dealers who say yes and then cannot. It's very rare, but to your point, like,
well, there's some flow over. There's some even though, okay, they can't convert 50% of the additional traffic, but God, we just blew 50% more traffic in their door.
Yeah.
And inadvertently, they won.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the real crisis. I don't think most dealers struggle with a lead problem, man. I really don't. I think most dealers probably have more leads than they can effectively handle. Not call twice and say, hey, this is a dead lead.
Yeah.
Right. I think most dealers have more leads than they can effectively handle. And shameless plug, I think one of the things that we do is we perform our services in a way that is in congruency with how a dealership operates. Does that make sense? It's a hey, we're going to do this. You should expect this. Here's how you should handle it. Not here's all the traffic. We did our job. Don't give a shit what happened after we let it go. Right. And I think that's to be honest, and maybe I shouldn't even be saying this, because obviously we would love to work with more dealers, but I don't think most dealers have a straight up marketing or traffic problem. I think they have a
conversion
problem, a sales process problem, a communication problem between their marketing and their sales department. And I think, I mean, our three stores are the epitome of this, and we've obviously we've got more, but our threes are the epitome. When you perfect that bridge, which is why this whole thing starts, when you build that bridge effectively, is when the magic happens, and that's what he's referring to. Stop, build the bridge, go.
Yep.
And then everything changed for us.
All right. So last question.
Okay. Hit him.
Monty,
Yes.
you've been doing this since 2013. You started in
Right.
2014.
Right.
That's 12 years.
Yeah.
If
So
you could
13.
go back 12 years ago, what's the one piece of advice you would give yourself?
It would go back to the people element.
Okay.
And I would tell my past self, I would say, don't be stubborn about keeping somebody in a position.
Yeah.
When you should move them around or
Move them out.
or move
I
them out.
have a saying.
Move them
I'm going to
out.
move you up,
Right.
or I'm going to move you out.
Correct. And that would be the most critical piece of advice. Don't be so stubborn and arrogant on your ability to train.
Yeah.
That would be the biggest thing that I would tell myself. And, maybe that would be good advice. I can't say because I did, because I walked the walk that I walked, and being stubborn on some stuff, we turned out some folks that were really good at their position, but I think they could have been happier in other positions within the dealership.
Yeah.
Boys,
I think people are everything.
Yeah.
Like we would not have the organization that we have now if it wasn't for our people.
dude, I've seen you reap the benefits of what he just said more over the past 8 months than I've ever seen us reap before.
Yeah.
Just getting people in the right spots.
Yep.
Being able to move on when we
Yep.
need to move on. It's incredible. It's why we've had the growth that we've had.
100%,
Right?
yep.
Yeah, and I would remind myself too, when you're doing that still comes with a certain level of patience, right?
It does.
So it's okay. I'm not saying, hey, we're not going to train folks. We're going to train them, and we're going to give a proper window. And if it doesn't look like it's working, then let's figure out what their talent is. They're obviously a good team member. We would already cut them loose.
Yeah.
But we may need to move them to a different position. But
So-
that's after a fair assessment and a fair training period.
It's one thing that I think you do very well is you give people every opportunity to succeed.
Yeah.
There's no
That's
no unchecked angles, right? Like, no, we're going to give you every opportunity to succeed, and if that doesn't work, well, then we have a process.
Yeah. It's three things. Did you give them the tools to do their job?
Right.
Did you give them the training to do their job? And then did you give them the mentorship and the time that you should spend with that person to make sure they're successful with the training and the tools that you've given them? Unfortunately, if you've given them the tools, the training, and the time, and they still can't be successful, they're the wrong person.
And that's okay.
Yeah, they're the wrong person.
that's
It
right.
sucks.
That's
It's
okay.
horrible. I like one of the worst parts about my job is getting rid of people.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like we're reading this book right now, it's called Extreme Ownership. And he says something along the lines of there's an obligation that I have to not only the organization and the dealership, but everybody else on the team. And I can't let one person stand in the way of the success of either of those two.
We got
Sure.
families to feed, dude.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, we employ 45, 50 people
Got
at this
families
point.
to feed.
They have families to feed. We're responsible for that.
Correct.
So we have to make sure that that team is successful.
Monty, you should do more podcasts, man.
Well, you guys are a lot of fun.
Yeah, dude.
A lot of fun. I really enjoyed it.
Monty,
I appreciate you
being
guys.
on. Yeah.
Give me my theme music.
Let's exit this.
Shout out to everybody watching. We hope you enjoyed it. Monty, watch this. If you didn't, don't come back. Big shout out to my co-host, Dingle Eagle, Big Porcupine. Bigger shout out to our guests. Monty, really
Appreciate you being
it.
here, man.
Thank you for coming. Hope you enjoyed it. Like, subscribe, smash it. Tell them to smash it.
Smash it.
Get out of here.